The following transmission is between myself and Kenneth Vigue, founder and organizer of the Fallout for Hope initiative and lead showrunner of CHAD, a Fallout 76 story podcast. Inspired by the initially empty world space of post-launch Fallout 76, Kenneth set out to tell his own story set in the hills of Appalachia. 5 years on, his story, that of Simon and Chad, has spun off into a grand saga of mystery, adventure, and self-discovery. In that time, he and the rest of his team have had the opportunity to work with many other talents in the Bethesda sphere, such as legendary voice actor Wes Johnson and longtime Fallout developer Pete Hines. With the success of CHAD, Kenneth would go on to create a charitable organization called Fallout for Hope, which helps raise money for charitable foundations such as St. Jude's Children's Hospital, as well as the Alzheimer's Association. Over the course of our conversation, we talk about the body of work that Kenneth has been involved with, the interpretation of media, as well as the messaging of the Fallout series itself. This is the Atomcast, and the best way you can show your support is by subscribing to our Patreon, as your monthly contribution will go towards improving the quality of transmission, as well as helping to decrease the time between uploads. As always, links to our Patreon, as well as guest socials and charitable organizations, will be linked in the description below. Without further ado, Kenneth Vigue. Ken, Merry Christmas.
Same to you.
Yeah, this episode is coming out a little bit before Christmas, but all the same, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to you, yours, and everybody who's listening to this episode right now. It is a festive time. It is the time for celebration. Yeah, it's festive. There you go. It is a Festivus kind of time.
We shall commence with the airing of our grievances.
I got a lot of problems with you people. You specifically ring in the before we actually get into all that, what is, so like I usually give a little blurb at the beginning of these, so anybody who's watching this will know who you are, but who would you say you are in your own words?
Ooh,
A real head scratcher there, isn't it?
Well, I guess fundamentally I'm a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always kind of been a storyteller.
And what kind of, because I think anybody, again, I have a little blurb at the beginning here, but I think anybody who knows you more so connects you with, obviously, CHAD, Fallout Storytime. Is it Storytime or podcast?
Podcast, yeah.
Podcast,
CHAD, a Fallout 76 story podcast, yeah.
Yeah. So I think anybody who knows you knows of CHAD. In your own words, how would you describe CHAD?
That's a hard question. You mean what the story is, or what it means to me?
I mean, I guess let's start. We'll start simple. What is the story?
Okay, that's an easy one. So our story began back in year one with Fallout 76. We were NPC-less. So it was a vast, empty wasteland with just a lot of Wes Johnson as robots to talk to us.
Gotta love him.
Gotta love him. But there really wasn't anything there aside from the people that you meet and the people that you bring into the world with you. So because of that, it was a kind of a Wild West time that I don't think anybody will ever be able to experience again, which in a way makes me sad because it was a really unique experience. In that first year, the game had a rough launch. So it was a child that was very unloved. And yet because of that, I think it had a unique appeal to me as being a great sandbox to tell a story. And that started really simply with just creating a caravan company called the Appalachia Trading Company. And we did role play like caravan routes in game, where we'd walk and go on missions and quests fetching things and role play as caravanners before Blue Ridge ended up being a thing in the game. So out of that was born the story of Chad and Simon. It takes place in Vault 76. So Reclamation Day happens, and everyone is thrust out into a very unforgiving world with very little resources provided by Vault-Tec. And the story is that of two people who take different paths out of that vault, walking very different roads. You have Simon, who is very much of a conflicted, tortured, sad sack. Both of his parents had passed away in the vault, and all he knew was just bullying by Chad and his friends. So he emerges with his friends out into the wasteland, except he went out by himself for some reason. Nobody was there when he woke up. Chad, however, has the same experience, but has a very different journey in the wasteland. Things just go well for him, kind of effortlessly. He embodies kind of the stereotypical Chad persona that you think of when you hear the name. But slowly, as our story goes on, how you look at the characters changes very specifically based on the events that unfold before you. And you realize that some of what you've heard before isn't necessarily the truth. It was someone's personal truth, but not the actual truth. And so who you tend to like as characters tends to shift a little bit. Now we're getting to the tail end of our season 2, and we've told a really, really increasingly big story over time that doesn't retell the story of Fallout 76. We, including the updates, we've told our own story within that framework. All of the events that we experience in games still are happening around us. But this is our characters kind of on their own unique journey, trying to figure out, from a meta perspective, why don't they die? They can't die. And so what they eventually unveil is that it's part of a vast conspiracy and also grand experiment by Vault-Tec, backed by the Enclave, to perfect a process for perpetual renewal. That at the point of death, your molecules become suspended. Your consciousness is shunted into the atomic shop where you can do some shopping. And then your body is reintegrated, and you download back into it and go about your day. It's a really unique evolution as far as the story goes, because we've been able to bring in some of the original voice actors as well, now that we do so much of these episodes and work for charity. So it's been really fun bringing in some really, really talented voice actors to play around with us in this kind of crazy world and play some really unique takes on their characters they didn't get a chance to the first time. And also not be... Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to touch on that real quick. I didn't want to interrupt you,
Yeah.
but you said that you were able to bring in some of the original voice actors. Were they reprising their characters, the characters that they play? Were they reprising those roles?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Which characters?
Oh God, I got to think now. Let me think.
You're really hurting the voice actors' feelings right now. You don't.
I'm trying to think, because it's been this is a 5-year journey now.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely.
So I'm trying to think.
Besides Wes Johnson, obviously.
Yeah, Wes has reprised, of course, his bots and some other original characters. We've got Alex Cazares, who does Rose the Raider. She is truly fantastic. We have Pete Hines, who didn't play an original character in the game, but because he's become one of the most popular villains in our story. And people really, really love listening to his character, the judge. He's kind of the foil that's been unfolding, especially this past season, as being one of the big bads in Appalachia, which he really enjoys and still is doing now that he's retired from Bethesda.
It comes natural to him because if you believe what some people say, he's the villain in real life.
I don't believe any of that. No,
No, of
he
course
is.
not.
Yeah, he is one of the most down to earth people that I've ever had the great fortune to meet, who cares so much about community and has done so much for community that people don't even realize.
Mhm.
Yeah. And he also, sometimes when some of the developers have been able to come out and play with us, the late Ferret Bowden, who's a truly prolific writer who's worked on Fallout 3, 4. He wrote for Starfield, Fallout 76. Really amazing, amazing person
Mhm.
that I had a chance to get to know. Also joined us on the show as a character called the Archivist. Um, and for both Pete and Ferret, and even some of the other people who voice characters in the show, like Bethesda's community manager, Lady Devon, they don't do a lot of voice acting. So in those cases, what I try and do and write a character that plays to their strengths.
Mhm.
It's kind of something that would be an archetype that they would enjoy playing. So in Pete's character, he gets to be the persona of this judge character. He gives absolutely no crap about anything. He's brutal, he's sarcastic, he's direct, he says whatever he wants to. He loves being able to do that. For Devon, she gets to be this wild, crazy raider who's completely unhinged and so authentically unfiltered that she enjoyed it. And Ferret, playing the character of the Archivist, played this really gifted librarian who has been going around trying to catalog and protect the fading history of the old world. But he also had something going on behind the scenes that we don't really know, that we're still kind of uncovering a little bit as we come to the end of our season.
Mysterious background.
Yes, very. And I ended up, unfortunately, he passed away tragically
Mm.
last October. Um, so we changed a little bit what we were going to do, but he had a beautiful send off. The last episode that he'd recorded for his family still allowed us to air what he'd recorded. He recorded it just a month before he passed away.
Mm.
I didn't even know that he was sick.
Yeah.
And I felt bad about it too, because he in the midst of what he was going through, it was something he wanted to do. So
Mhm.
he had a great send off as a hero in that episode. He
Yeah.
saved the day.
I feel as if it's always a little strange working with artists and stuff, like posthumous,
Yeah.
when they pass away like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um what's sort of like thematical elements are you exploring with the CHAD podcast?
I've really enjoyed playing with different types of formatting. Um, as we've continued to tell our story. We've done a few Halloween anthologies, which was something new. The Halloween two-parter that we just did um, came from a really specific inspiration. We've done drive-ins where the theme is a focus on a drive-in. So in sound, um, the way in which we structure that episode is if you're seeing a thriller from the 1960s at a drive-in. In our first season, we did a kind of a nod to 80s slashers when we did our Sickleman saga. The Sickleman, if you're exploring in the waste, you go to an abandoned cabin, and in the basement of that cabin, you find just this crack in the foundation. You go inside, and there's this thing that says the Sickleman is here, was here, and it was changed to is here with the Wastelanders update.
Mm.
And later on, you find a bunch of heads in a hot tub that I guess was the Sickleman. Just so it in that first year there was some lore, I guess, debating about if the Sickleman was a real character, and if so, who was it? Is it still out there? Come to find out, developer Nate Perkypile, when he was a kid in school, came up with this character called the Sickleman. He's really into horror, and he put it in there as an Easter egg. But from that Easter egg, we ended up telling this whole like 3-part arc. And Oxhorn actually voiced the Sickleman in our story. But we did it was like a 1980s style send up for slashers. So we had a VHS sounding logo intro to that. And it oddly works with Fallout in a way that, and also probably because it's an audio story, but I play around with formatting to try and challenge us each year. This past one that we did was a little bit different. In the old days, they used to include cassette tapes or records in cereal boxes. Now, instead of some really cheap toy, but the toys you used to get, like 60s, 70s, and 80s, that you would get inside cereal boxes were pretty damn fantastic.
Like decoder rings and such.
Yeah, all of that kind of stuff. Like a little submarine that you could build. So I envisioned a holotape inside a box of sugar bombs, but it ended up being a cursed holotape. Ooh. So the 2-part story that we told at that one, Wes Johnson joined us for that one. Casey Manillo, who voiced Shinji Ikari in Neon Genesis Evangelion, and also voiced a character in Starfield, ended up playing a character in that story as well. But it told it in a cassette tape format, as if you were listening to a book on tape. People really loved that story. And then we also dropped, as a bonus episode, we created soundscapes for Halloween, like spooky soundscapes that you would play in your front yard as kids are trick-or-treating. So you have a soundscape of imagining what it would be like to be in the cranberry bog being hunted by super mutants. So we created this really fun sound effects tape to go along with that goes on for a few hours.
That's a pretty big deal that you were able to get one of the original voice actors for Neon Genesis, because that was a huge anime back in the day.
Yeah, Casey is fantastic.
Yeah. Let's walk back a little bit. Let's go back in time a bit. I guess let's start with, I guess you don't technically have to start out as a gamer to fall into Fallout 76. I would imagine you did at some point anyway, but like when you originally, began your epic career in gaming, what was sort of the kind of game that you gravitated to, like, originally? In other words, thinking back, what was, like, maybe not the first, but one of the kinds of games that you played most often?
Well, also, to be perfectly fair, I don't really have a career in gaming, so to speak.
Oh no, yeah, I was being sardonic.
No, I know it. Yeah, like, and it's kind of part and parcel to the same answer. So I work in marketing. I've worked in marketing since I was 19, and own a marketing company. And part of that, a lot of what I've done and have done now, 22 years that I've been doing it.
Oh wow.
Is finding ways to tell stories in a way that get people to connect. And stories aren't always something that you say or something that you read. Sometimes it's as simple as a journey. Sometimes that journey is, finding a product that meets your need and connects with you on an emotional level enough for you to get to say, I need to buy this and make this part of my life.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's an event where you go to something and you have a really special evening or occasion and you walk away having been on a different kind of journey. Um, I think part of that and the ability that I have to do that that I've cultivated kind of over a career also paired well with the kind of games I ended up gravitating towards. Um, I really love games that tell compelling stories. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they have to have the best writing or they have to break new ground. Sometimes it's as simple as creating an environment with which you're not just listening to a story and going on a journey with the characters that you're playing or playing with. Sometimes that's the sandbox that you find yourself in that allows you to build your own story in the form of role play or coming up with ideas for stories you could tell yourself. I love the hell out of the Bioshock games.
Mhm.
That's similar to Fallout in that they do really fantastic work with presenting us with what if scenarios. What if, this timeline had been a little different and some madcap inventor and businessman and group of people got together and built a city under the ocean or built a city in the sky or those kind of questions. And it creates a really compelling world that's really fleshed out. Um, I've played more Bethesda games than I have any other game by any other company. Fallout 3 was the first game that I played by Bethesda that I really fell in love with immediately. That step out moment out of the vault where the world opened up before me. I
It's
had never experienced the kind of open world game that presented in any game that I had played before, ever.
right up there as one of probably the most iconic moments in gaming history.
Yeah, it revolutionized so much of the gaming experience, and then when you pair that with the modding scene that exploded, and continues to explode,
Hmm.
it creates an environment for a game that presents a really fantastic world space that you can play around in, but also one that continues to evolve and is still going strong, 26 years later?
Hmm.
Um with not with Fallout 3, with all of Fallout. I mean, these games just keep going on. Elder Scrolls, I fell in love with. Skyrim was the first one I played. I actually haven't played any of the older titles. It's sometimes hard when you join a game late and you try and go back ones that represent a different period of time in terms of maybe graphics or fidelity or even gameplay experience. Um, the
Yeah.
story, like on paper for Fallout 1, uh, paired with the score, like Mark Morgan's soundscapes that he built and the music for those that first game, and then kind of the resampled versions that they did for the second one, is some of the best storytelling that launched Fallout and continues to grow and build with what they created back then. Has a great story, but I've tried so hard to play it. And arguably, I'm a very casual player. I cannot for the life of me master a turn-based, top-down kind of bird's eye view game.
Yeah.
Um,
I feel you on that one because
and
I can't remember. Gosh, I can't remember when it came out, but Wasteland 3 was my first Wasteland game, and I
mm,
really enjoyed that game. I it's phenomenal score, phenomenal uh gameplay. The story is really solid. I nothing specific about the story really like jumped up and like wowed me. There were a lot of like really fun moments, really wacky, goofy moments. You most likely know this, but for anybody who doesn't, the Wasteland series is like the predecessor to Fallout. Um, and one of the things that was when I was playing it, because you as a Fallout fan, you go back and you play Wasteland, you see a lot of similarities in like theming, aesthetics, this, that, and the other thing. In the Wasteland franchise, they have pneumatic mechanical exosuit armor, but they also call it power armor. So that was really funny. The first time they mentioned power armor in the Wasteland series, or in Wasteland 3 specifically. But so like I played that, and then I have a friend who played the original two. Um and he was like, "Oh, you should check out like Wasteland 1 and Wasteland 2." I'm like, "Okay, yeah, I will." And that already got a little bit interesting because the original Wasteland 1, I don't remember what system it came out for, but it was like closer to like a text adventure with like MS Paint level like
Wow.
bit stuff. I probably have imagery up right now displaying it, but like compared to Wasteland 3, it looks archaic. It was probably massively revolutionary for the time, but that time has since come and gone. And even when I went back and tried to play the 2014 remaster, if I remember correctly, it was still a little bit closer to like a text adventure, but like with way better comparatively graphical quality.
Yeah.
Just a little bit, just still a very steep learning curve. So I skipped that, went to Wasteland 2, and it was a lot easier of an approach, but it was still a very different, much older gameplay style, and that's something that I see a lot of people talk about when they come from like the Bethesda Fallout games and like New Vegas and stuff, and try to go back and play like Fallout 1 or Fallout 2, especially Fallout 2, with how difficult the learning curve there is like right at the beginning. But yeah, I feel you when you come in, as you say, like late to a franchise, and there's like all these games that predate it, and you're all like, I want to do this game justice, or I want to do this series justice, and like go back, but then you like immediately hit a brick wall.
Yeah, and it makes me sad. I think if I would have discovered that game back then, I would have absolutely been in love with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I played a lot of games that were definitely had some quirks and a learning curve to them. Um, but now trying to go back and do that now is an impossible task.
Mm-hmm. With Fallout 3 specifically, because you said you were drawn more towards games with like, a very rich story to them. When it came to Fallout 3, was that because like I remember when I first played Fallout 3, and it was just like a random game. There are three games that to this day I absolutely adore and absolutely love. And the only reason is because I just like picked them up randomly from a Blockbuster. When my mom took me to Blockbuster to, just rent video games and movies and stuff. And that's the Grand Theft Auto series. I played Grand Theft Auto 5 as my first one. The Hitman series, Hitman Blood Money was my first, and then Fallout 3, Fallout Fallout 3 being my first. Um so like me specifically, I just picked it randomly off the shelf. I'm like, this looks like it might be interesting, and then here we are. With you though, how did that develop? Because obviously, you look at a box and trailer and you only get so much of like the story and stuff. So beyond just like the story, because obviously that's what kept you hooked in the series. What initially drew you into the Fallout franchise?
The box art.
Yeah, okay, fair.
It was it
Next
was it
question.
was it was literally
No,
the
no, no
day after.
explanation needed.
It was the day after Christmas. I had a Best Buy gift card burning in my pocket,
Mhm.
and I
As you
went to
do.
knocking. Yep, and I went to Best Buy. Although that experience, I don't even know if that exists anymore. I don't know. I think they're not selling DVDs or VHS. I'm not sure
Um,
if they're going to keep selling games, but
because I've worked at Best Buy several times. It's been like a year or two since I last worked there, but last I heard the second or third time, I can't remember, I worked there, they had recently removed the CD section, so there was like just no music. Um, and then I saw an article recently that said that they weren't going to be doing like DVDs or Blu-rays anymore.
that's such a
Um,
bummer.
I know, right? I feel like they would probably still do video games. Um, because like, that like you want to get like a new console or like a computer or something, like you go to Best Buy. There's not very many other, big options. So like you like going there and like, oh, PS6 is coming out, or the Xbox 1920 or whatever, like that's coming out, and like go to Best Buy, and then it's like an event, you know and I feel like
It,
they
it
would still have games for those like big event moments.
it could be my age, or maybe things are swinging back around again. But side story that's connected to what we're talking about. I went out the day after Black Friday shopping
Mhm.
to get most of my holiday shopping done, and pulled into a plaza that I usually go to every year to poke into a few stores and get what I needed. And all of a sudden, right there was a brand new Barnes and Noble bookstore,
Hmm.
and it completely caught me off guard because you know we're not this is 2023, not 2003,
Right.
and so many of the traditional larger bookstores are just gone.
Mhm.
But I went in and the place was packed. People were shopping books and picking up DVDs and toys, and they even had a video game section and board games. And it got me thinking a lot about, for as digitized as things become, I think there will always be a counter trend, because you have something that you physically pick up. Like I did going into Best Buy, I took a look at the box art, I flipped it around. It was a retro aesthetic. I thought, damn, this looks cool. I brought it home and it sat there and it looked at me for a while until I finally popped it in and dived in, and I had the guide. So I'd take the guide and, while I was eating breakfast, I'd flip through it and try and figure out the goddamn damn subway system,
Right.
maze. And you have something that has a strong presence in your home. It's a physical thing, a tangible thing.
Mhm.
I've bought, as most people do, a bunch of games on Steam that are totally virtual. And when they have the big sales, you grab a few titles. I've probably only played maybe a quarter of the titles in my Steam library. The
Mhm.
rest of them just kind of sit there. It's not like they're physically in my home, and there's an aspect of them that's saying, "Hey, you should really explore me." There, you don't have as much of a connection to it.
It's like they
With this,
exist in a different room that you never go into.
right? That's exactly it. Yeah, and you have, there's an intent. You have to actually go install it and really make effort
Mhm.
to really engage with it and dive into it. But yeah, picking up that box art and bringing it home, playing Fallout 3 for the first time, it totally hooked me, and I was in for the ride. Fallout New Vegas, Fallout 4, all the way to Fallout 76,
This
and hopefully
is
Fallout 5 by the time I'm retired,
I know, right? When by the time
coming
we're
out in 2070.
right, you're gonna be on your the last like minute and a half of your life, and your
They better
grand
have a gaming PC in hospice, is all I'm saying.
right. Your grandkid's gonna show you the trailer for Fallout 6, and you're gonna be like, nice, and then flatline.
If I have grandkids, I'll be asking, "Who are you?"
Right? Like, where did you come from?
I didn't have grandkids.
And like, oh grandpa, and then it's like did it, and then credits, and then that's when you flatline.
Yeah.
His next question is probably going to be the one that's gonna it's really gonna rustle some jimmies, but like
Oh Lord.
what's the best Fallout?
You're gonna hate this answer because it
Maybe.
sounds so blah. I don't have a favorite Fallout.
Oh come on, that's
I
not
know. See,
what do you
because I
mean?
love them. I love them all for different reasons. When you think about what our experiences are with games, I think if someone now, like me, going back to Fallout 1 or 2, I don't know if a lot of people picking up Fallout 3 for the first time would fall in love with it the way that you and I did.
Mhm.
Because it was a particular game for a particular time in gaming history. It represented maybe the best of its time. But, the gameplay has moved on and gotten better. The UI, the experience, they're able to do more. The games are bigger and more complex and all of that kind of stuff. So the nostalgia factor is a big part of what we find ourselves deeply connecting to. When we play those and when we revisit them, we are bringing with us, a decade or 2 decades worth of memories going back into a game where you recapture how you felt at a particular point in time in your life. So you're not just replaying that game, you're also putting on a nice, cozy, warm sweater, and you're stepping back into a version of yourself that no longer exists because we all grow and change and evolve like we all do, like we're supposed to. So when I go back and replay Fallout 3, that's taking me back to the start of my career. I had roommates and a really crappy room, a tiny room, late at night with no air conditioning, the window open, and yet here I was walking this wasteland, um, in the middle of a hot summer after diving into it for a winter, and then just kept exploring it and playing it for almost a full year. Um, then you get into New Vegas. New Vegas for me took the best of what I loved about Fallout 3 and improved it in so many ways. They made some changes there that were really great, in terms of the gameplay and some of the choices that they made. I love faction clothing. It makes perfect sense to me.
Mhm.
The system, the way in which they rolled that in, allowing you to, don a costume and go sneak into the NCR camp or, put on a Legion outfit and hope they don't look too closely at you. That makes sense from a role play perspective. You should be able to do that because you'd be able to do that in real life, where you
Mhm.
kill someone, take their outfit, and, go play around in their camp.
Yeah.
Um, and plus, the music for that game, the DLC, we were just talking about this today with some people on Twitter. I think the DLC for New Vegas is just truly exceptional
Mhm.
for a number of reasons. I think the art or the covers of those DLCs is so photorealistic and distinct, that each one of those could stand on their own as their own game, independent of Fallout New Vegas.
Mhm.
Particularly when you get into something as contentious as Dead Money. People love or hate Dead Money because it is, uh, such a grind if you play it without cheating. It is really tough. Um,
It's definitely one of those get good kind of moments,
it's yeah, super challenging, but so incredibly unique from any other DLC experience we've ever had. It creates kind of like this typical, spy cliche scenario where you find yourself abducted and, you're going through this process of essentially going on a bank heist for this person, and you have this choice of either doing it or, getting your head blown off.
Mhm.
Um, and then you get to Old World Blues, and god damn do I love Old World Blues. It has some of the most ridiculous dark humor out of any of the games, with writing that is just hilarious and characters that are even more hilarious. Um, I love how incredibly insane and quirky that DLC is. Um, and it's a completely different narrative foundation and structure, vibe, and tone than Dead Money. So you have a really wide variety of DLC that checks a lot of different boxes in terms of taking you on this kind of wild roller coaster of emotion experience. It's as if all of these teams went off separately and just kind of created their own thing and put into it without not a lot of I guess an overarching theme between them.
Yeah, like they weren't given like specific direction, like you need to make this kind of game, or you need to
Right.
follow this specific way of building something. It's just like we have an overarching story. We want to drop some tidbits in each DLC, make a game. Because Honest Hearts was very similar, in the sense that, I mean, it was kind of similar to the base game, but when you look at a lot of like what they talk about in the game, um, and like a lot of like the overarching story of the mod is a lot softer in a sense. You know, it's not super grandiose. The story itself is actually pretty straightforward and simplistic, but it's the way they go about talking about the story, or talking about the setting that like in Zion Canyon, or like the larger world around them. And it's just
Yeah, you also have in that some truly spectacular voice acting that still is one of the most memorable characters that a lot of people will pick out from Fallout, which is Joshua Graham,
yep.
voiced by Keith Sarabaika, um, who, ironically enough, his dialogue is on goddamn motivational posters, and people don't know it came from Fallout New Vegas.
Right. It's on posters, it's on Live Laugh
The
Love
fire
shirts.
in me burned brighter than the
But you got to say it with like an upbeat like Cali girl kind of voice, like the fire in me burn, like, oh god, stop.
I'm
Like
an empowerment coach, and this is my motivation.
it just speaks to me, like, bro, he killed so many people. Yeah, because I remember like when that stuff was like originally like getting discovered, and people were all like, bro, the comparison, this man has genocided so many tribes.
Yeah.
And now he's live laugh love about all of it. um but no, yeah, like I get that, with like, because you were saying like you love each Fallout game for different reasons. As a Fallout content creator and one who frequently interacts with the public via like streaming and comment sections, and just like, stating an opinion. I'm asked all the time, like, what's the best Fallout game, or what's your favorite Fallout game? And I always, every single time, have to ask a follow-up question. I'm like, well, what do you mean? Like, what's your stipulation here? Are you asking what I think the best Fallout game is? Are you asking what I think the best Fallout story is? Because both of those questions are very
Yeah,
different and have
right.
very different answers. So, like you were
Like
saying,
and a good example of that. So after New Vegas, Fallout 4, I loved how far Fallout 4 came.
mhm,
Visually, graphically, the ability to mod, it is amazing. The voice talent, the side quests in that game, um, the DLC storytelling that we got with that game was equally fantastic.
Bar
But
Harbor,
yeah, Far Harbor is a high
right,
watermark for one of the best DLCs in any Fallout game.
it's right up there.
Um, so good. Uh, and then you've got a voice protagonist, which I loathed. I hated that so much. I
Yeah,
hated settlement building. And I'm putting an asterisk by that because that's all I do now in Fallout 76. I just hated it at the time
Right.
because it was too new, and I didn't really understand what it was there for.
It had a lot of
Uh,
it had a lot of growing pains
it did, yeah, and that system has come a long way. Like building in 76 is actually fun. In Fallout 4, it just felt like an exhausting chore.
until you try
And then
to
you had
until you
needy settlers like, shut up and build your own stuff. Leave me alone.
right. And Fallout 76 is built to your point, yeah, Fallout 76's building has come like a long way until you like try to rebuild or remodel the second story of your house, and then like it's always like it's like, oh, you can't build there, nobody will be able to walk up, and like there's literally a staircase like 2 blocks away. What are you talking about?
I feel like such a jackass to say this, but whenever I see that stuff, you have to answer people with stuff that sounds like it's made up.
Right.
Like the quirks from within the building system,
Mm.
that when you try and explain it to people, you're like, "Oh yeah, well you have to connect this, that, and the other thing, and don't forget to rub your tummy and drink a Nuka-Cola, and only do this on the vernal equinox,
Yeah, yeah. If
and
you
you'll have
don't,
no problem. It'll clear your staircase right up." And they're like, "What?" And you
right.
just you live in a weird, uh, I guess, nexus point of understanding some of the quirks of the Fallout games.
It's definitely one of those things where it's like you have to experience it, um, and like be like get in the mud, in order
Right.
to like really like get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Fallout 76, I love because it changed my life.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It gave you gave you opportunities to just grow and expand.
It wasn't so much that. Fallout 76 gave me back something I thought I had lost,
Hmm.
which was the ability or even care to write. I'd stopped writing for a good 10 years after it went nowhere. And for whatever reason, after not writing in a decade, Fallout 76 ended up becoming my muse to reconnect with that part of me that I thought was long gone.
It is an interesting it is an interesting lens in which to rediscover something like that, because I mean, you see it all the time. You see not even just in Fallout, you see in like a lot of different franchises and mediums and stuff like that. People basically seeing things through that lens, or rather more so like they're putting out their ideas through a filter, and their filter is that game. And when they come out the other side of that filter, they're pretty much the same story, but sort of like they're imbued with a lot of the positive things that they see from that franchise, and they're able to tell their story with those aspects in mind. Kind of like a lot of the what is it? A lot of the like the Undertale fan fictions and stuff, or like the FNAF fan fictions and stuff. They're telling sort of semi-unique stories, like their own stories, and they're doing it through this secondary storytelling medium, being the franchise that they really enjoy, thus creating, fanfics and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah, and you know, when I said earlier too that in year 1, not having an NPCs in the game was probably a bad move business-wise that they ended up quickly correcting,
mhm.
that they knew they needed to fix. But if there had been, I don't think I would have written anything or started all of this. I really don't.
Like
I
if
think it
there had been NPCs from the get go.
yeah, I really because it never happened before. I think I was in a vacuum with a sandbox and felt like I needed to create something in it
Hmm.
because there wasn't anything else there to guide me
You're
or
presented,
to digest.
yeah, you're presented with a a canvas upon which to paint, basically.
Yes.
Hmm.
Right. Exactly. As opposed to walk into a gallery and experience what other people have already painted for you.
Right.
You've got the paints that Bethesda gave us, and you got a blank canvas, and there's some stuff to play around, and there's some macaroni art and elbow glue, elbow macaroni, some glitter,
Right.
Elmer's glue.
I feel like that's kind of how. I feel like that's kind of what Bethesda's approach to Starfield has been, because playing through that game, there's a lot of things that not really feel incomplete, but feel more direct. They're direct. They're straight to the point. They're not simplistic in and of themselves, but they're at the same time not overtly complex to tell a more complicated narrative. So, for example, uh, what is it? Have you heard of a game called The Forgotten City?
No.
So, The Forgotten City is a game. I forget who the publishers were, or the developers rather. But The Forgotten City is a game, and the basic premise of the game is that you are taken back in time to an ancient Roman city during ancient Roman times, and you have to solve a mystery in order to return to your time. It's a pretty simplistic premise. It's a who done it. All you know is that somebody is about to commit a crime, and in this specific city, when somebody commits a crime, everybody dies basically, and it's like a Groundhog Day kind of situation. If you don't get it right, you loop back around, try it again. If you don't get it right, you loop back around, try it again. Um, Eventually you do get it right. I won't explain how because that ruins the story and everything, and the larger point of the game itself. But that game was originally a Skyrim mod that followed roughly the same story, except you were in like what was it? Yeah, you were in a Dwemer fortress. Um, and like it's the dwarves and everything, or the Dwemer rather. But the it's because that game, um I completely lost my train of thought there.
That's all right.
What were we talking about?
I think we were coming back around to talk about. I think with a lot of these games, and something Bethesda does really well is creating opportunities for us to
Oh,
to fill in the blanks.
that was it,
Um,
yeah.
and they one of the things Ferret Bowden, um, when we did a charity gig with him for
Mhm.
Fallout for Hope one year, and he joined us to do a lore talk, which was amazing. We got to ask him all kinds of questions about writing that he's done, and things that he could answer, and some things that he couldn't answer. But one of the things that he talked about was they love to have us talk about things and come up with ideas and theories. When he writes lore, or wrote lore rather, past tense, he would go through and write it completely, and then he would take things and throw them away, delete it so it never exists anymore.
Mhm.
Because they purposely love leaving room for us to get in there and do our thing. Or, Fallout lore casts and, discussion boards and art and debates, and they love all of that stuff.
Yeah, filling in the blanks rather.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was actually that was actually where I was going with that because I mentioned how to me and probably a lot of other people, there were a lot of moments in Starfield and a lot of like settings and stuff that felt maybe to some overly simplistic, to some not fully realized, and to others maybe just like I don't know, maybe shallow. Um, I really enjoy the game. I think it's great. I think there's definitely area that could be improved. Maybe that will with DLC mods, what have you. But it's also the first game of a new franchise, so it's like there's there's still plenty of stuff that can be done. But one of the things that it really feels like to me is that Starfield is purposefully built this way, um, so that it can allow people to do that, to basically like I said, Starfield's the canvas in this sense, and it allows the modding community specifically to just paint in a sense. And
And this also Starfield is very different than what they've done before because it's the first time in a very, very long time that they're launching something wholly new. There's no existing lore, there's no meta, there's no expectations
mhm,
except the expectations that we bring to the table. It's they're building something new from scratch, so there's a lot of room to build out this universe, literal universe, with games to come and mods to come and all of the cool things coming to that game. I am loving the hell out of Starfield.
what's one of the one what's like one of the big things that you would like to see come out of Starfield, or like maybe not a direction for like a future game or a future project or something, but like if you could add one thing to Starfield like right now, what would it be?
This is gonna piss people off because I know how they feel about it, but I Fallout 76 was the very first online multiplayer game I have ever played.
Mhm.
To date, I've only ever played single player games by myself doing my own thing. Now it's gaming, particularly the past 5 years, has become so social for me. It's hard to let that go.
Right.
I really enjoy playing with friends. So, in a way, it made me sad that kinda like Fallout 76, you could build camps, you can have friends over, you can build stuff together, you can go check out their cool camp. We can't really do that in Starfield. So
Mhm.
I wish that we had like a co-op mode or even a simple multiplayer game with like 4 people like you can in Redfall or some of the other games where, you can get together as a group of people and go play it together. I would love the hell out of that. Um, and I know that's not everybody's cup of tea, but this game, Fallout 76, has become such a social outlet for me and added so much to my life that I didn't know I was missing. It's kind of hard to get into another big game that I love as much as I love Fallout 76, but have that element missing from it.
Do you think Fallout 76 would have maybe not been as big as it currently is, or maybe have inspired you as much, like drawn you in as much and held your attention for as long, if it had been a co-op game instead of an online multiplayer game?
No, it wouldn't have. Because I would only be able to bring people that I knew into it, which would have been hardly anybody.
Right.
Whereas with this, I mean, the cast and crew, friends and best friends, people that I've met from all over the world. Um, everything that's come from this community, um, in the way in which we've been able to join together, get to know each other, do good things for other people, that would not have happened in just like a co-op game without having this huge community that's interconnected, that you're kind of forced to meet, particularly in that first year when mics were open and you had to talk to people and had to seek out friends because it was pretty unforgiving. It
Mhm.
was rough that first year.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm not talking about glitches and crashes. I'm talking about the experience itself. It was you resources were light. A queen fight was brutal.
Oh yeah.
Um, there were people in back alleys trading legendary weapons that they grinded the white spring, doing nuke drops in that area for days on end. It was a wild time, but so you're forced to rely on other people, which pushes you outside your comfort zone in a really good way, I think. But that experience just doesn't exist anymore. It's a lot more of a casual game now. It's easy for anyone to get into. It's not as challenging as far as a resource and survival aspect goes.
Mhm.
PvP doesn't really exist at all anymore either. So you don't have to worry so much about that as you did in that first year. It's just very different. But I think in that difference, things are gained and lost. It certainly is way bigger, and more appreciated today in terms of reviews and experience than it was that first year. But the thing that is lost is the social aspect of people being forced to step out of their comfort zone and meet people, which you can still do. I mean, there's Discord communities, huge role playing groups, and things like that. But you have to seek them out as opposed to having an organic in world encounter, um, where you can actually hear and talk to somebody, and hear them eating potato chips and stuff like that.
Right. Breathing heavily.
Yeah. Or in one instance, a couple. No, I'm not going to tell that story.
I remember uh I remember back in those early days, I don't remember well, I mean, it's pretty obvious what specifically led me into one of the train stations. I was looking to, sell stuff. But I'm like a low level player. I can't remember where specifically I was. I want to say like maybe Morgantown or something. Um, but I was in a train station. I think maybe like still the first like week or two. And, I'm crouching and hiding and sneaking around literally anywhere I go. Cause I'm awful at first person shooters. And I'm like, I'm gonna get put in the ground if anybody finds me. So I'm sneaking around trying to be cautious. Especially since I was at the time still not fresh off of, but had recently been playing uh less and less Rust over the months and weeks and stuff. You know what Rust is, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So,
One of
yeah.
the inspirations for Fallout 76.
Yep, yep. So yeah, I'm fresh-ish off of that, and I still got that mindset like anybody sees me, I'm a deadman. I need to never be seen, sneak around, be quiet, sell whatever I can, try to get some good stuff, and then just, I don't know, hide and survive. Um, and so I'm doing that. I'm in the train station, I'm selling stuff, and then just all of a sudden I hear thump, 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 and some guy in power armor running up into the train station, and I hear him like stop right behind me. I'm like, this was a good run. This is I'll come back. I'll be
The
better,
trails.
right? um, and because he's in power armor, I'm like, oh god, this is a guy from like the beta, the PTS and stuff like that. It's like, yep, this is it. He's about to hit me with a fat man at point blank range, and I'll be dead. He'll suffer like 2 points of damage. But then he's just all like, "Hey man, I got a bunch of stuff that I don't know. You want it?" And I'm like, Yeah, sure. And then he just drops like a whole bunch of like some stim packs, water, food, stuff like that. I don't think he dropped any weapons. I think he dropped some armor and maybe one weapon. I can't remember. But yeah, he just dropped that and they're like, all right, there you go. Have fun. And then just like ran off and I never saw him again. I'm like, oh, this is new.
To
How do
this
I
day,
process?
I think it is hilarious that they weren't aware of how badly we did not want to fight each other.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say that people didn't, because a portion of the community certainly loved PvP, survival mode, nuclear winter, and all of that. I enjoyed nuclear winter.
Nuclear Winter was
Um,
amazing.
it was so much fun, and it was one of the best designed PvP modes that I've dived into since then. It was really intuitive. It was fun. They did a great job designing that. I'm sad that it doesn't exist really anymore, but I think it's hilarious that they didn't realize just the community wasn't looking for that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the wider scope of things, I don't know how they couldn't have. When you look at what the choices that we made in previous Fallout games, the point of all of those games, for the most, and yes, I did nuke Megaton more than once, but for the most part, they're games that are telling us an optimistic story. We've always played the games trying to do the best that we can in morally gray situations. And sometimes, you commit an atrocity or two, but for the most part, there's stories where you're trying to make a difference, and make sense of a world gone mad in the vacuum of no structure, no checks and balances, none of that. So when all of us, particularly those of us who've played Fallout for a long time, got together, I think it natural to assume that we would try and find ways to listen to what they told us we're supposed to do, which is to go out and rebuild and reclaim, so we took it to heart and we went out and did that and found each other and built homes and helped each other in real life and all of that kind of stuff. The community ended up being so much more wholesome, I think, than they envisioned.
Right? Because I mean, it's that everybody talks about like, oh, I like the video games where like I'm a big strong army guy and I got the gun and I go around and save everybody. Like that's the ultimate video game trope, being able to help everybody. Like, the ultimate like gamer fantasy, power fantasy.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of optimistic stories, that's actually, that's a good segue there. You have besides, Chad and the podcast, you have another, I guess organization seems a bit too like high up there. Like, you're not Mr. Businessman making big deals and shaking
We
hands.
consider ourselves to be an initiative.
Yeah. Initiative. That's a good way to describe it. You have Chad, and then you have Fallout for Hope, which is give me your how would you put that in your own words to Fallout for Hope?
War never changes.
There you go.
But
Yes.
hope can save a life.
Ooh, that's a good one. I like
That's
that.
that's what it is.
Yeah. So Fallout for Hope is is it a seasonal thing, or is it just like it's just like all like it's running all the time? Because you partner with you partner with St. Jude's Children's Hospital during the winters, or is that like again more of a seasonal thing, and you do other charity events at other points during the year?
We started with St. Jude. So December of 2020, a year most of us would like to forget.
Right.
I was in a particularly dark, depressed spot, like so many people were. And I didn't want to end the year, a year that was just so filled with negativity and division and arguing and all kinds of crap that was going on. to just end the year without trying to feel better about the year that had gone by. So I wanted we have been supporting St. Jude privately for years now. I absolutely love the work that they do. They directly have led to breakthroughs in science and research to cut down on childhood cancers, to treat life-threatening diseases for kids around the world. Just a really fantastic organization that was started very simply by an actor who wanted to create a foundation to allow children to grow up free of disease, that their lives should not be cut short by cancer and other things that visit upon them before they even have a chance to grow. So I got together with a few streamers. I figured, yeah, we'll get some people together, do a fundraiser. We ended up doing over 150 people joined us for that one, and that raised, I think, over $109,000 in a week. And I was blown away. I did not expect it to get that big, or for us to raise that much in such a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I thought about it, and it had such a great energy to it, and people enjoy doing it so much. I wanted to make it a yearly tradition for the Fallout community to come home for the holidays, for us all to work together and do something good for others. Since starting that with St. Jude, we've broadened, and we do 2 primary fundraisers a year. We've done some other ones throughout the year, but it gets exhausting to try and do more than 2
Mm-hmm.
because of the scale of doing them, especially now that there's over 700 streamers and content creators on the team in 86 different countries. There's a lot of us that work together for these different causes through the year. So we predominantly just do Wes Johnson's Voiceapalooza now for the Alzheimer's Association in the spring, and then for the holidays we do the St. Jude fundraiser.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So you
It's less
mentioned
draining and exhausting, and also, there's only so many times a streamer and content creator can go back to their community and ask for a wallet or pocketbook or digital currency to open.
right,
Yeah, and help others.
because you had you mentioned that you joined Wes Johnson for his thing in the spring.
Yeah.
Have you partnered with any other like notable actors, notable not brands, there's another word for it, personalities rather?
Not for charity. We've had organizations now reach out to us that have heard about us, and want to work with us, but I've had to turn down. The USO tour had reached out to us,
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of larger organizations, for all different kind of causes you could possibly think of. But we're in a comfortable spot now, and I don't want to do it too much that we stop being effective. No, Wes is the only one that reached out to us to ask for us to get involved in this. And you don't say no to Wes Johnson.
Oh no,
He's someone that
never.
you want to. He's a very beloved, wonderful person. Yeah, and this cause means a lot to him. It's our pleasure to help.
What do you feel as if the messaging of Fallout is?
I think the messaging of Fallout ties back in with the story that we've been telling with CHAD, essentially. In every instance of the games, you have some pretty common elements. fundamentally, the question comes down to the road that you choose to walk. There's the easy road, there's the harder road, there's a road that you make by your choices, and there's the road that people push you onto. It always comes down to the path that you end up walking. And survival situations, whether in real life or in Fallout, reveal so much truth in them. People's truest selves, their mask slips away when confronted by true threat. When all of the window dressing, the set dressing, all of that fades away. And it's just you against the elements, the unknown, against threat, against death, against violence. Um, and how you choose to react and conduct yourself in that situation says a lot about who you really are. And most of us, thankfully, will never have to face that kind of situation. And some of us, unfortunately, have, some of them will, and some of them will certainly in the future. But I think the Fallout games present us with that kind of a scenario in a really compelling way. You know, in Fallout 1, you're just a vault dweller. You go out into the world looking for something pretty simple and end up doing something pretty big that has repercussions far beyond yourself and your vault. And yet by the time you come home, you're so changed by the journey. The overseer's like, yeah, thanks, see you later.
Yeah.
And you just want to shoot him in the face.
And some people
Fallout
do.
2 is Fallout 2 is that same kind of story once again, where you're essentially a nobody nomad and you end up rising to don the mantle of a mythical figure that came before you. Once again, trying to save the world. But really it's more about saving people you care about. And just saving the world is just part of that journey, but it's not been the primary motivator. Fallout 3 is that same kind of thing. You start out looking for your dad and you end up getting caught into something so much more than that. Once again, in New Vegas and 4 presenting us with the question of what is humanity? You know, in the end of all things, how far do you go to carry on? Do you redefine what humanity is by preventing us from ever dying or fading away, by building ourselves a body and then stepping into it? Although I do think in that particular case, I think we could have taken that so much further if that was the big message there. I think there was a lot of potential to playing around with that idea.
Mhm.
In a very big way, and asking ourselves, well, what really is humanity? Because even in Far Harbor, we're presented with people who are not who they think they are, and yet they very much are conscious. They have feelings, they care, people care about them. So does the fact that they don't have, you know, that they were manufactured as opposed to born, does that make them any less a person? And you
Right.
could certainly debate on that forever.
A lot of people have too.
Hmm.
For pretty much as long as the game has existed, pretty much as far as Fallout's existed. I think people have been talking about that.
And one of the best theories about that game that would have uh, been really interesting to explore and think on more is the theory that you yourself are a synth
Oh
and you've
yeah.
been a synth this whole time. I fucking love that idea.
Well, it
That
was almost like, because like in the I forget before which update, but like uh in the early days of the game being out, there was actually a computer terminal in the institute that, maybe not in so many words, but it pretty much spelled out like the sole survivor, the character that you play as, is in fact a synth. But then the terminal was removed.
Yep, and they ended up putting it back. I think that was one of the things that was a big secret Todd said that people still hadn't figured out. And it ended up being that terminal, and I think they ended up putting it back in.
Interesting. Well, because like I mean there is that, but then there's also it's
You can use VATS immediately.
Yep, I was about to say, like, you before you even get the Pip Boy, you can use bats. It's all like, hey, yo, hold on, wait a minute, he's on to something. um, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff in Fallout 4 that either goes perhaps like either unrecognized or more so like unrecognized. Like I think there's a lot of elements that perhaps don't get enough attention. One of the things that one of the elements that I see a lot that I don't see a whole lot of people talking about is just how paranoia affects people. Because I mean, in every Fallout game, you have people who are a little bit, wary of strangers, this, that, and the other thing. Like, oh, he could be a raider, he could be a slaver. The whole slaving thing was actually something that we saw a lot of in Fallout 3. But in Fallout 4, I don't think I've seen as many characters so paranoid and afraid of maybe not so much, well, yes, directly the, thing that the Institute being concerned about that, but more so like the threat, the potential for harm or loss in a sense.
One of my favorite episodes of The Twilight Zone came out in March 1960, and it was part of the first season, and it was called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. And it starts out very simply, typical neighborhood, very suburban, 1950s, 60s. This is very Mad Men era. Everything is beautiful and happy, and kids are playing, and there's lemonade stands, and people mowing their lawn and polishing their cars. Everything is great until it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
When the lights go out and they're cut off, and very quickly, paranoia fills the void. There are seeds of doubt planted, and things kind of spiral out of control from there, ending pretty much, it goes from paranoia to a witch hunt pretty quickly, with people turning on each other. And it very much plays out in a larger sense, that same kind of feeling in Fallout 4, where people are really paranoid about synths and what the truth is behind them. And you have people that are kind of caught in the crossfire of that, people who are synths that don't know any better. And in some cases are probably better off not knowing. Like Paladin Dance is a great example. Here's someone who knows exactly who he is, who does arguably great good, who's looked up to, and all of that. He finds out he's a synth. I'm sorry, spoilers, everybody.
Yeah.
We're far removed now.
Spoilers for an 8-year-old game at this point.
Get good, catch up.
Right.
But he finds this out, and it tears down his whole damn world.
Mm-hmm.
He's shattered to pieces after that, because he is the thing that he was taught to hate and to hunt. It's interesting fodder for stories.
What would you recommend people to consider or like keep in mind when it comes to new experiences, new happenings, new games, movies, just like when things change as they are, obviously bound to, destined to, what advice would you have for those people who experience change, and what would you recommend people like keep in mind?
I think you have to choose to have a new experience to begin with. I think so often we intend on having a new experience, but that's really not what we want or what we're really open to. Being honest with yourself and knowing what you like, what you don't like is something that is kind of a lifelong journey. And I turned 43 this year, so I'm like a gaming granddad at this point as far as age goes.
Right.
But
Give me a
uh,
fossil in a couple of years here.
yeah, I mean, the older you get, the more you're comfortable and you kind of know what you're looking for. But I think you also can work harder at allowing yourself to continue to have new experiences and be open to them. When I said that Fallout 76 was the first multiplayer online game I ever played, I had no interest in them beforehand because I imagined what my experience was going to be was what I'd seen on YouTube and Call of Duty lobbies. And the last thing that I needed after a long day is to come home and be sworn at by a 12-year-old kid and teabagged in the face. That wouldn't enrich my life or make me happy.
Yeah,
Um,
that's not a
but
good time.
but nonetheless, I said, "All right, well, fine. I guess this is going to be an online game now. So what the hell? I'll go into it."
Mhm.
And I tried not to bring any expectations. I think all too often, and I think marketing, ironically enough, in the field that I'm in, can do experiences great disservice because I think we want to compare things all the time. We want to know what things are like because we want to have a comfortable route, a guideline to have our experiences in, as opposed to finding ourselves in something completely new.
Mhm.
So often tourists go over to Europe and they immediately go to the first McDonald's. Um, I mean, that's an example of what we do a lot of times when we get into new movies or games. You have to choose to just let yourself really sink into it, knowing that it's not gonna be anything like you played before. So going into Fallout 76, I said, "Okay, this is gonna be absolutely nothing like Fallout games that I've played before." Nothing at all. And I think because I didn't have any expectation in terms of what was going to greet me, it was easier for me to kind of dive in and experience what it is and be open to something new.
Mhm.
I think sometimes we want that, but being able to actually follow through with that and honestly and authentically do that is not an easy thing to do. It's something you have to work at. Starfield is another great example. I think the marketing wise, I think that game was described a few times. Oh, it's going to be like Skyrim in space or like Fallout in space. That sounds great from a marketing perspective. I think it's terrible to actually say to anybody because the moment you say that, you have gamers who've played both Fallout and Skyrim quite a lot, who played a lot of the Elder Scrolls, and are going to want to have those same kind of comfortable experiences or awareness when they dive into something new and have an expectation that that's what they're going to get. But in fact, Skyrim, certainly to me, is not like either of those games.
Mhm.
There are comfortable elements, but it is a very, very different game. It's a whole new universe. Um, it's the flavor and world building that Bethesda is known for, but it is not at all like the Elder Scrolls games. It's not like Skyrim. It's not like Fallout. It's not like Oblivion or any of that kind of things that comparisons are drawn to. So going into Skyrim, I also said, okay, this is yet again going to be something that's going to be completely new. I'm just going to have to enjoy it for what it is, as opposed to try and compare it to what it isn't.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Kenneth Vigue, founder and organizer of the Fallout for Hope initiative and lead showrunner of CHAD, a Fallout 76 story podcast. As always, if you enjoyed this episode of the Atomcast, the best way you can show your support is by subscribing to our Patreon, as your monthly contributions will go towards improving the quality of transmission, as well as helping to decrease the time between uploads. Until next time, I thank you so much for listening, and I will see you all out there in the wasteland.